Hey, hi everyone. Thanks for coming. We will start on our lecture right now. Today we'll be talking about illustration. Um, yeah, quick little rundown of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about the final and what that kind of entails, illustration basics, pen tool, fill and effects, and then do a quick little wrap up. So pretty quick lecture today. This is the attendance link. It's the same as usual. I'll give you guys a few seconds to find it again. And this is the slide deck link. If you guys want to type this in and make a copy of the slides, there's a lot of good resources that you can reference back to. So I'll also give a moment to copy this link down. Is everyone good? Okay. Um, First we'll jump into the final, what it's gonna look like and how you're gonna go about that. So you can create your own final project proposal, and our goal for this final and this class overall is for you to discover something that you're interested in making and see that vision all the way through. So we've gone through like Figma basics and all the way through prototyping. So this is really a great chance to let all those skills shine. What we ask is that you incorporate at least two of these skills, including auto layout, variants, prototyping, and illustration, which we'll talk about more today. So proposals for your final will be due next Tuesday. They must include a project idea and description, your two selected skill concentrations, and a midpoint check-in goal, and will give feedback on proposals no later than next Friday. And for the midpoint check-in, it's going to be April 22nd at 11:59 p.m. It will be your Figma file submission on B courses, and this is a really great way for us to give you feedback and keep you on track based on your own schedule to make sure that this final gets completed on time and that you're not too stressed with your other finals coming up. So how your submission is going to be, it's going to be a Figma file and a form. So like the midterm, your file should be linked in your write-up PDF. This should encompass your entire process and not just your final product. We really want to see how you went from point A to point B. And you'll also submit a quick form to indicate if you'd like to present at our last lecture. It's very exciting. And for your write-up, it should be submitted as a PDF. It should be 300 words max, and it should describe your proposal, briefly, your design process, and your final product. And this is due Monday, April 28th at 11:59 PST. Any questions about that? Okay. Um, but with that, we will jump into illustration and this gallery that you guys can reference later on. So Vector Illustrations has a lot of great illustrations by Spencer Camp. As you can see here, lot of great vector drawings. Game Consoles and Joystick by Noor. Everything is linked here. If any of this interests you, this is a really great reference to have. Tiny Calculators, super intricate little vector illustrations by Marcy. This is the Sea Ranch by Paolo. You can see that not only are they just using vector illustrations, but also really utilizing gradients, which you guys can really easily do on Figma as well. Here's a briefcase. You can see very detailed, lots of gradients, a lot of sharp lines, a lot of masks used. This is Soul, if you guys have seen the movie, but another example of a vector illustration. The Monument Valley Level Design Kit by Alex. Super cool perspective illustration. This is by Yvette. Oh no, Yvette Young, illustration by Joey. But we'll talk more about what is illustration, what it is, and what you need to know. So illustrations are visual imagery that express or communicate. So in the most literal and traditional sense, they're drawings or graphics that accompany text to illustrate something written. So if you think about like a children's book or any like anatomy pictures, all of those are examples of illustrations. They always tell a story or communicate without text, and it's not limited to a particular medium. So you can see on the right, plethora of illustrations that use different mediums that are conveying different things. So a vector illustration, as a quick little refresher, vectors are lines, points, and curves that maintain structure through computations. So no matter how much you zoom in or out, it's always going to be very clear. Um, it's more of a medium than a style, as vector graphics can look different in the same sense that paintings can. So if you look on the right, all of these are vector illustrations using like the pen tool, for example, on Figma to draw all of these out. Some of them have really sharp lines, some of them could be blurred with gradients, but all in all are all using vectors. The principles we'll examine today are perspective, color, and composition. There are a lot of other principles that you can look into, like light, silhouette, scale, texture, etc., but we'll talk about these three first. So if you guys want to make a copy of this lecture slide, we're going to do a quick little activity by just drawing a childhood memory. Could be as basic as you want, could be a scene, could be food, a person, etc., but let's just all go back to here. Oops. If everyone is at the lecture slide. Yeah, if everyone could go to the activity page and then make your own frame. Yes, perfect. And then you could draw whatever you would like. Anyone else want to illustrate besides TK? Okay, we'll just move on. Next we'll talk about perspective or lack thereof. So perspective is how you understand three-dimensional objects in a two-dimensional space. There's a variety of ways to achieve dimensionality depending on the kind of effect you want to evoke. So whether that's realistic, exaggerated, disorienting, etc. Sometimes, especially in vector work, you might not even want your illustration to appear 3D at all. So one point perspective is when everything converges at one point, which is called the vanishing point. It's a type of linear perspective where you can create a sense of depth through clear structure directing the eye. So if you can see the example on the right, there's one vanishing point at one specific part, and all the lines converge at one space to make it seem like it's three-dimensional. The horizontal line that the vanishing point sits on is called the horizon line. So broadly speaking, the closer something is to the horizon line, the further away it looks. And in this example, the horizon line is where the black and yellow meet. You can also work with 2-point perspective, 3-point perspective, etc., where you add just additional vanishing points. So what that can look like is in all of these pieces, you can see like the bed, for example, could have one vanishing point where everything is just converging in the back. All of these, you can see that there's perspective used. Next is isometric. An isometric view has no foreshortening, but still conveys a sense of three-dimensionality. Instead of using vanishing points, isometric art uses parallel projection. So if you can see, these lines are running parallel to each other. The core of isometric are two sets of parallel lines that run through an entire piece, and these form natural diamonds that are preserved throughout the piece. So you can see all of these are examples of isometric perspective. You can see all the diamonds forming within all of these. Next is atmospheric. It's using the atmosphere to create an illusion to create depth. This is communicated through reduced clarity, adjusted value, saturation, temperature, and size. So if you can see on the right here, the one in the front is the biggest one and it's the brightest color. And as you go back more, you can see not only is the object getting darker, but the shadow is getting darker as well. And just by using these different shapes and colors, it really evokes the fact that some things are in the foreground and some things are in the background. These are, again, examples of atmospheric perspective. Next is 2D or flat art. So a lot of the times vector art and graphic design doesn't really stick to any of these rules because they don't necessarily need to appear three-dimensional. So flat design refers to a specific visual style that uses simple shapes and bold colors. At the end of the day, not all art needs depth. So 2D or flat art is, you can see on the example on the right, this is a really great example of what it could look like. And these are not exhaustive. There's a huge list of other types of perspectives that you could use, how you want your designs to ultimately look. Experiment with what you need to convey and don't be afraid to trust your own judgment. I think we all know what looks best and what you can do to achieve that vision. Next, we'll talk about color. Color is core to how we see and feel illustrations. So different palettes can create different atmospheres, emotions, and understanding when and how to use what colors is super important when you're trying to convey certain things in your designs. So colors are used to attract attention, evoke emotion and meaning, organize similar elements, and add strong aesthetic for usability. Color wheels are really phenomenal. Within the color wheel, we have primary colors, secondary colors, and tertiary colors. So primary colors are colors that you can't make from other ones. So it's red, yellow, and blue. Secondary colors are combinations of these primary colors. So red and yellow, for example, would be orange, yellow and blue, green, and then purple for red and blue. And then tertiary colors are mixing adjacent primary and secondary colors. So it's like mixing red and orange, blue and green, etc. These are just a good swatch of the most basic colors, and you can see the emotions that they all evoke. So red is like excitement, strength, love, and energy, but blue is something that's trust, peace, loyalty, competence. So we can see a lot of tech companies, for example, love using the color blue to evoke trust from their consumers. Next, we talk about hue, saturation, and value. So hue is where on a color wheel a particular color sits. Saturation is how intensely pigmented a color is, and value is how light or dark a color is. So hues are characterized with basic color words. So if you think red, yellow, green, blue, those are all hues. And to change a hue in Figma, all you have to do is move the rainbow hue slider below the color picker square. Saturation is how intense or vibrant a color is. So it ranges from no saturation, which is just a complete gray color, to very bright and neon colors. A saturated red is like, if you think red is possible, well, a desaturated red is a like reddish gray, could be even like a grayish brown. And to change saturation in Figma, all you have to do is move the color picker horizontally. So when you move it left, it's lower saturation, and right is higher saturation. Value is how bright a color is. It could range from the lowest value, which is black, to the highest value, which is white. And you have to move the color picker vertically for that. And the key is that you can break down a color into three simple, meaningful numbers. However, there's many other ways to understand colors. So we learned there's value, there's lightness and brightness. There's RGB, the quantity of red, green, and blue. Hex is used for web, and CMYK is the quantity of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So it's not necessarily used in web design, but like for your printer, for example, there are 4 cartridges for CMYK. And Figma allows for several equivalent formats, but it's in hex by default. So several also include an extra number for opacity. So all these numbers make a little bit more sense once you think about the amount of different hues and colors that exist within a color that you pick. So when it comes to creating palettes, let's talk about what we can do to make our color palettes look good. So on the color wheel, it's kind of divided into warm colors and cool colors. So if you think about it in simple terms, warm colors are like red, orange, yellow. Cool colors, green, blue, purple. Um, So you can see one is pretty warm tone. I don't know if it's super apparent on the screen, but on the left side, it's more warm tone of like a warmish brown and a warmish navy color. On the right, super cool toned. The white is pretty gray. And then the blue is also like a very cold, cool tone blue. So when it comes to color schemes, they're complementary, analogous, triadic, and split complementary. So complementary are directly opposite colors. So like red and green, purple and yellow. Analogous are adjacent colors. So things that are more similar. So like red, orange, magenta. Triadic are 3 evenly spaced colors. So red, this blue, and this kind of yellow color. So they're all vibrant but require careful balance. And then the split complementary is variation on opposites. So there's a stronger contrast but less tension and more variety. So these are all examples of all the the types of color schemes that we just talked about that you can feel free to reference later. But all these palettes there's a really great variety and they're all visually pleasing because of one property that's relatively constant is that they either have similar hues, saturations, or values across a palette. Um, but yeah, nothing is like a super strict rule. I feel like everyone kind of knows a gut feeling when they see colors that look good or harmonious together, but these are just some rules that you can stick by if you're having a hard time coming up with a color palette. Um, so while you're making initial palettes, don't be afraid to deviate because some colors can look completely different when you put it in a context with other colors. So keep an eye on contrast to maximize accessibility and leverage high-low contrast. Um, Figma has a new feature recently that they added for color accessibility. So if you're not sure whether it's accessible or not, or if the contrast is good enough, they have like a little icon in the color picker thing to tell you if it has enough contrast in comparison with the other colors that you have. So with light, there's a lot to know. It's how light affects colors. If you're familiar with the blue, black, or white gold dress, you've already seen how colors and light can really play tricks on your eyes. So really consider the full context of an object and how it'll appear. So you look on the left with these images, it's the same object the whole time, but based on what the light looks like, it's perceived differently as well. Next, we'll talk about composition. TK will talk about composition.
Okay, cool. So basically it refers to the way that elements in a piece are laid out, basically how they interact with each other, and then basically how you're able to actually like visually take it in. There's a couple of general rules that you can use to your advantage to create a composition that works for you. And this includes like pictures, art, or literally any of like the stuff that you're kind of like creating. So yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard of the rule of thirds. If you take any sort of pictures, like Instagram pictures or anything like that, you know that the key to taking a good picture that looks good on Instagram is the rule of thirds. And you pretty much have heard it in the context of pictures, but the eye is naturally drawn to like the resulting intersection of the thirds. For the most part, you kind of want to have a composition that is 2/3 of the way of your picture in the sense. But yeah. So for example, you can see that like here, this is kind of divided up into, if you really think about it, thirds horizontally and vertically. And you can see that the points here are exactly where these objects kind of end. And that's why your eye is naturally drawn to this. For example, here as well, you can kind of see that, let's say you crop this out and you move him. These like particular people are actually two-thirds of this whole composition. Same with here, you can see like the distance between the two actresses, or actually just Emma, are like one-third away from each other. Another thing is called visual triangles. Also, if you've taken any sort of pictures or created like any art compositions or anything like that, you can see that using triangles and diagonals can really help in leading lines and shapes. Here you can kind of see that this image in particular is shaped like a triangle, and you would see that a lot in like classical arts, and it's just something that you would keep in mind when you're creating a composition that looks like aesthetically pleasing to you. If there's a reason why that you think that like these compositions are famous or anything like that, it's because they're able to create triangles and compositions that look pleasing to your eye. And this is like one of the rules that most artists actually do use. So Mona Lisa is an example of this, and then another classical art of like these dogs creating like a bunch of triangles. Yeah, basically just draws your attention to like the action being held in like these pictures. For example, again, in pictures and videos and anything, you want to be able to create triangles in order to like position yourself in a way that looks aesthetically pleasing to the viewer. Here you can see like Harry Potter actually uses this exact thing. He like points his wand up to create like a triangle here. And then on this side, the phoenix actually creates like a triangle with the rest of the composition of the book. Another thing that's really important to kind of take note of in any sort of like art piece or composition is movement. Um, there's a reason why all of these art pieces are really famous. Here, actually, you can see that there's like a triangle being created with this like tower object in here. And then movement obviously lets you um, follow your eye around to something in an inanimate object. So for example, the big wave, the great wave is also a really famous art piece that uses movement to kind of draw your eye to this particular like object or like focal point. These are like kind of like triangles, but you can also see that the way that they're created or painted makes it seem like they're walking down a path. And this is why this is also kind of an important thing to recognize when you're designing or like creating an art piece. Same with this. You can clearly tell this person is like dancing and stuff like that. Another thing is called negative space. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of it, but negative space is basically like creating like a contrast of colors and having your eye be naturally drawn to the color in particular. There's like a lack of elements, so often like it's layered on top of black, white, or like a very like plain color. And being intentional with negative space, especially in like app design or any sort of like design, even in Figma, is something that's really important to keep track of. Just because you want your viewer to focus on, let's say, this next step, like a button that's like highlighted, or like a title, for example. And so negative space is really important for this. Okay, here you can see that this person in particular is highlighted and you can kind of see him because of all the negative space around him. He very much blends in with this piano and like the dark background, but because all of this negative space, which is like generally pretty blank, is surrounding him, you can see that he is the main object here and not like this piano. Same thing with here. I think this is a Spider-Man movie. But you can kind of see that because he is like this one instant like dark object in like the sea of like blue, your eyes are automatically drawn to him because not only is he the center of the page, but he also is like the only like dark object here. Yeah. So basically you can combine what you learned about color and composition to create like a unity of like illustrations or even like through film. So a lot of like traditional artists and filmmakers use these principles to inform their work. And you can see here, there's like a triangle here. There's like a lot of contrast or like negative space in this one. Same thing with this image and then etc. Yeah. Um, I don't know if anybody wants to participate. Um, but does anybody want to identify where the muted or saturated colors are used in particular this picture? This one's a really easy one. If not, okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah. Wait, this is perfect. So basically, like obviously you kind of mentioned earlier, but the fire alarm is like using a red, which is a very contrasting color to this like sagey green. And so your eyes are automatically drawn to this light red composition that is like right here. Um, do you also want to identify the rule of thirds in this particular picture? It's okay if not. Okay. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So like right here actually, if you really like break down this image, this part is like 1/3 of an image and then there's 2/3 left. And then same thing with this little like pipeline thing in particular. This is 1/3 of like the image and then there's 2/3 left. So that's how they would break it down in like films or like animation or illustration. Yeah. Any questions? Okay, cool. Just a really quick recap of the pen tool. This is the pen tool. You can do vector editing mode. You can create like shapes, any like diagonals, polygons, anything to be honest. Um, yeah. You can also create like a bent curve. So you can see here that you can click on this. So this would be clicked, and then you would click on this, which allows you to bend the line that you created. So this is like a path. Each of these are little nodes, so these little dots and stuff like that. When you select or double click onto a specific node, it'll turn like this dark blue inside. And then you can create or control these angles by pulling on the handles here. And when you select on the handle, it'll color in like a dark blue color. It's a little hard to see here, but like these are all like bigger versions of it. You also have a vector panel. Um, Basically, this vector panel appears on the top right of the sidebar. You can kind of control like the appearance and stuff like that through there. Um, but yeah. And then there's also a paint bucket and fill tool. Basically you create like a shape and you can fill in this shape with like pressing this little plus button here, or pressing this paint bucket here. Um, yeah, that's basically how you color things in different colors if you want. Or you can just like create like different selections of like different colors and stuff like that. You can also fill vectors with multiple colors. Again, kind of just mentioned, just click on this particular like part, and then you can just change the fill through here or use a paint bucket to change the fill through here. You can also use healing nodes. So basically, when you create a straight line, a phantom node will appear. It kind of just like gives you a sense. I think now it's in the center of the lines particularly. They basically give you like a bunch of suggestions of like which nodes to create and stuff like that. Um, but let's say you accidentally made this midline and you're able to you don't want it anymore. You just have to like control Z it. But if you don't want this middle node, you can shift backspace without deleting like your actual like line in the middle. Yeah. Um, Behavior is a little bit different. You can't really delete it, but you do have the undo button. Bend tool is very similar, kind of whatever I just mentioned earlier, but you just press like the little bend tool on the bottom and then it'll bend like the line. Yeah. Another thing that a lot of people actually have trouble with are like wobbly lines in vector drawings or illustrations or anything like that. So basically, the reason why there's so many nodes or why you have wobbly lines is because you have so many um nodes where the curve is different. And so that's why this one kind of looks jank because there's just too many nodes. So if you simplify the amount of nodes that you have, it'll basically make it a lot smoother looking. And that's just something that a lot of like illustrators on Figma tend to do because it's like you want the least amount of nodes in your illustrations for it to look straight or smooth. Yeah. Okay. So if you guys haven't seen, there's like a little gradient thing. You can do a linear, radial, angular, or diamond. These are just different like gradients that you can use to fill in something. You can also change the opacity, especially when you're using a gradient, and you can apply this to both fill and strokes. So here you can kind of see that you can create one simple gradient. They'll give you like a suggested, like maybe this one color that you chose, and then either a lighter or a darker color based on like whatever color that you chose that is closer to black or white. Or you can create your own. So you can add like little like separations in this by just clicking on the line here, and then you can change the color yourself manually. Radial is pretty cool. You can kind of see that this creates like a little nice little gradient blend. You can also add like different nodes of color, I would say, in like this color line and create really cool illustrations like this. Angular is also very different. This one's pretty cool for like making a color wheel or something very similar to this. Um, one thing that you have to know is that the first one and the last one have to be the same in order for it to create a smooth gradient all around. Otherwise, let's say that this last one is purple, then it'll just start with red here and then end with purple here. Diamond just creates a diamond shape in whatever unit that you're using. And then you can also create color styles by pressing on the little plus button on this side, and then saving the style. And there's a bunch of different effects. So you have a drop shadow, which is like this right here. You have an inner shadow, which is this part inside of the object that you have. The layer blur will basically blur the whole entire layer, and the background blur will blur the back of whatever layer it is. And one thing that's really cool about this is that if you have like this mirror-esque kind of texture, you can kind of create this by playing with all of these different effects. This is drop shadow, pretty self-explanatory. You can change the horizontal or vertical movement based on like this X and Y position. And then you can change the blur and the spread makes it stronger. And then same thing with the color here. Inner shadow, same thing with like the directions, same thing with the blur, same thing with the spread, same thing with the color actually. But let's say that you don't want this to be blurred and you just want it to be like a line inside on one side, then you can just turn down the blur to 0. This is layer blur. This is background blur. This is kind of what I mean by like, oh, like let's say you put like this like transparent glass layer on top of something, then it blurs like the background here. There's also different blend modes that you can use to apply to like different images, just to create like maybe different lighting effects or even like I think it's like negative color space thing. I forgot what it's called. Pass through 100 just basically means that everything that you put in this image kind of goes away. Here, this is pass through 40, which basically just changes the opacity. Overlay 40%, um, basically brings more life into the colors, but also makes it a little bit lighter in terms of like the background. Multiply makes it darker. And then color burn kind of makes it more contrasting. Okay. And this is a demo. Oh, this is not a demo. How do I get out of here? Okay. Okay. Here you can kind of see that this one is plus lighter, so I'm going to take this out. This is the original at 40%, which is the pass-through that we showed earlier. So I'm going to put this at 100. And this is just one solid like purple block on top of whatever this image is. So here, if I decide to change the blur or like any of these like blend modes, then you would press like this little like dot on this side over here near appearance. And you can see like there's all of these like different images or like options that you have. So this is normal. It's just gonna look like a normal layer that you put on top of the image. This is darken. So like darkens all of the colors and like gets rid of all the text. Multiply just makes everything darker behind it because the original layer is like dark already. Plus darker makes it super contrasted. Color burn, really cool one if you want to do like a lot of like opposite colors. See here that this like orangey yellow color turns red, and then this green turns a lot darker green. And then here, this is lighten, basically just makes it lighter. Screen plus lighter, all very similar. Color dodge makes it a little bit more like vibrant, especially for printing and stuff like that. This is overlay, makes it a little bit darker. Soft light, hard light, difference, exclusion, etc. Yeah. Hue in particular makes everything the same color of just different shades of like this purple color that's overlaid on top. So let's say I change this to like a blue. It's gonna change everything of this image into blue or like different shades of this blue. Yeah, that one's a really cool one to play with. Saturation just makes it more saturated. Color and luminosity, very opposite things. And this one kind of just makes it like the opposite brightness, kind of. Yeah. Okay. I know everyone's been waiting for this. Thank you all for coming. But the secret word is matcha. Yeah. Um, okay. Couple announcements. Homework and lab 9. Pretty sure that there's no lecture next week, so labs will also be optional. And then check the bit.ly after class for full information regarding the final and submit your proposals by Tuesday next week. Ignore this first part. Two things. If you guys are interested in the Figma Designathon, if anyone's like kind of interested in doing like UI UX product or anything like that, really cool opportunities coming up in 2 weeks with Figma actually. So this is a global competition with a bunch of different schools regarding like a how might we statement about Figma and the product itself. These are a couple like the Berkeley events. So there's a career watch party at Wheeler 204 this coming Tuesday, launch party that coming Friday, and then the work sessions will be throughout that weekend. So 4/18 through 4/20. Yeah. But if you guys are interested, register officially on April 18th, which is the launch party. And if you guys are interested in participating now, fill out the interest form as well as register on the Luma. Another thing, Design at Berkeley also hosts a designathon, which is coming up this week. It'll be at Residence Inn, which is like in downtown Berkeley, and it'll be this Sunday, April 13th from 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. Our registration will close on this coming Thursday, so in like 3 days. That's the link if you guys are interested, but it's also a product UI UX based designathon with Amazon as a sponsor. So if you guys are interested in meeting any of the cool Amazon design execs that are flying from Seattle, really cool opportunity. Register on Luma and through our Google form. Yeah. And that's basically it. If you guys are interested in any of those opportunities, I can drop like a bunch of like designathon links that we have from like a bunch of different schools. Thank you guys for coming.